The LSU season is over. The Pro Football Focus grades are in, and boy, did they rave about a certain freshman. Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comment below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's a tradition after every LSU game. We go through the Pro Football Focus grades once they're posted. As I always say, Pro Football Focus is a metric. It's not the metric. It's just something to consider. So we do it here. We go through it and we tell you what we think. So we will dive into that. We'll also hear from Brian Kelly from his press conference with the media after LSU's win over Baylor with some of the particulars of who stood out and, of course, looking ahead to the 2025 season. But where else would we start? Where else could we possibly start but with Trey'Dez Green? 6 catches, 53 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brian Kelly maybe paid Trey'Dez Green the greatest compliment he could, and unknowingly. But at the end of the game, he was asked about the freshman who played a big role. And he talked about the offensive line, but listen how he started.
How do you put it in perspective that he made you forget about Mason Taylor, who is an incredible player because of the plays he made on 4th down and 3rd down? We didn't give up a sack today without a first-round draft pick, a first-day draft pick, a starting 3-year starter. That's pretty incredible. So, yeah, there were some bizarre things, but the big picture is pretty bright in terms of what happened today.
How in the world could you ignore the very first part of that? If you want to hear it again.
How do you put it in perspective that he made you forget about Mason Taylor, who
Mason Taylor is the single greatest receiving tight end in LSU history. Catches and receiving yards. There's never been a more productive receiving tight end than Mason Taylor. Trey'Dez Green had 6 catches for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. Let me put this into perspective for you. Again, Trey'Dez, 6 catches, 53 yards, 2 touchdowns. On the season, if you want to look at Mason Taylor, the amount of times that Mason put up a stat line comparable to that. Again, Mason finished with 55 catches for 546 on the season. But 6 receptions, Mason had 8 against UCLA, 7 in the opener against USC, and then he had 6 against South Carolina and Florida. One other time he had 5. That was against Ole Miss. He had 4 against Alabama, and then 3 against Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, and Arkansas, and South Alabama. I mean, there were only 2 games all season, the 8 catches against UCLA, the 7 catches against USC, where Mason Taylor in his 3rd year had a more productive day receiving than Trey'Dez Green did in this bowl game. Trey'Dez Green scored 2 touchdowns in this game. Mason Taylor had 2 touchdowns all season. Now, listen, I'm not minimizing Mason Taylor. He's incredible. But maybe the most important part of Mason, what I should say is maybe Mason Taylor's most important role in this offense was he was Garrett Nussmeier's security blanket. He was the guy on 3rd down, on 4th down, when you had to have it. You know Taylor was going to get open, and if you put it near him, he was going to catch it. He was Garrett Nussmeier's security blanket. Well, listen to what Brian Kelly and how Brian Kelly described Trey'Dez Green.
I think the presence of Trey'Dez Green at the tight end position gave, again, Garrett Nussmeier the opportunity to convert some key third and fourth down situations, which he's had all year with Mason Taylor. And that was really the biggest thing for us is would he have that guy available for him? And we saw that he did again. Just the deflection that he got that came up short on fourth down shows you the kind of athletic ability he has. So you'd really had some young players step up in those situations, which is what we really thought was going to happen, but you never know until they go out and play.
That's what you thought was going to happen. You can rep it all you want in practice, but until you go do it in a game, you never know. To Brian Kelly's point about third and fourth down, here were Trey'Dez Green's receptions. 4th and 5, he got 6 yards on the opening possession. 3rd and 5, scored a touchdown. 3rd and 2 on LSU's third possession, he gets a dozen yards. That was the big sequence where it looked like you were going to go 3 and out after they brought it within 14-7. Green converts on 3rd down. Then they go Aaron Anderson for 20 yards on the sideline. Then the Chris Hilton touchdown. Big play there for Trey'Dez. 3rd and 1, they went to him for the touchdown. That was his second touchdown. The game came on 3rd and 1. And then in the second half, he had 2 receptions. One was on a 1st and 10. That was the 21-yarder, his long play of the day. And then on LSU's last possession, they went to him on 3rd and 4, and he got 3 yards, 1 yard shy, and that's when Baylor roughed the punter. But again, 4th and 5, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 1st and 10, and then 3rd and 4. 5 of the 6 catches were on 3rd or 4th down where they targeted Trey'Dez Green. And that was evidence in the Pro Football Focus grade for Trey'Dez Green in this game against Baylor. His offensive grade was a 72.5. If you're above a 70, you're doing really good. If you're in the 80s, you're elite. 90s, that just doesn't happen much. His passing grade in the passing game was an 80.5 naturally. His pass block grade was a 69.8. If there was one bugaboo, it was the run blocking grade, but it wasn't due to a lack of effort. Listen to what Brian Kelly had to say about Trey'Dez Green and the work he put in these bowl practices on that part of the game.
Trey'Dez is an incredible competitor. The work he put in the bowl prep was second to none. His mindset, his want to go in there and mix it up and run block. As you saw, we didn't treat him like a wide receiver. We treated him like an attached tight end. I mean, he lined up in the core. He lined up in the slot. And I said this to you folks, we weren't going to treat him differently. We were going to treat him like it was Mason running that position. And he had to get sandpapered a little bit in practice. I mean, he went home a couple of times, and I'm not sure that he made it past 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. He was sore, but that was just what his commitment was, and pretty proud of him.
You love to hear that. In Brian Kelly's 16-minute post-game press conference, he probably fielded 4 questions about Trey'Dez Green. It was just a giant part of the conversation because he was a giant part of the conversation. This was a 5-star that came in, much ballyhooed, and you can see now why a guy like Kamorian Pimpton entered the transfer portal. You went and you brought in Bauer Sharp from Oklahoma, and Trey'Dez Green passed Kamorian Pimpton, and you saw it. And Brian Kelly's gushing over him, not just in their ability to trust him on 3rd and 4th down, but his willingness to grow and develop as a blocker. Now, I said it was a bugaboo. Pro Football Focus gave Trey'Dez Green his run blocking grade a 43. That's to be expected. I don't think necessarily that Trey'Dez is ever going to be a road grader as a run blocker, but his pass blocking grade was a 69.8. Now, if I'm going to put that into perspective for you, let's just look at, for example, LSU's pass blocking grades as a team for this game, and this will kind of put it into perspective if I can find the right page. Excuse me. So here it is. Forgive me. Okay, so when we look at LSU's pass blocking grades in the game, Trey'Dez was a 69.8. Paul Mabenga, who's a starting offensive lineman, was a 50.8. Tyree Adams was a 53.6. Again, Trey'Dez was a 69.8. DJ Chester graded out at 8. His pass blocker was an 83.4. So great day for Chester. Bo Bordelon, 82.1, and Miles Frazier, 77.3. So your starting offensive lineman did quite well. But keep in mind, Trey'Dez did better than 2 of your starting offensive linemen in his pass blocking grades. Your Josh Williams, it's one of the reasons he's on the field, his ability to pass protect. He's really struggled in that role this year, and his pass blocking grade in this game was an 18.1. So Josh Williams was. So the point being, Trey'Dez was pretty good. And one of the reasons your tackles held up the way they did is because LSU chipped and gave help on every play, nearly. And Trey'Dez was a big part of that. So some work to do in the run game, but passing with flying colors, and how they used him in the pass catching game, and also his willingness as a blocker. A lot of reason to be excited about Trey'Dez Green in 2025. Brian Kelly talked about some other players who had big days, and we'll get to the Pro Football Focus grades for them as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. If you're a Houdat like me, Week 18 is here. One more game to go. It's Saints-Bucks. You want to bet on it? You can do it at FanDuel right now this weekend. Jump on the FanDuel app. Maybe you just want to follow the Tigers. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. They're over passing totals, receiving totals. Those prop bets are so much fun, and they're all there at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So as we kind of move through the rest of what Pro Football Focus had to say, we always like to look at who are the top graded players and the bottom graded players, according to Pro Football Focus. And listen, some of this won't be a giant surprise. Garrett Nussmeier was your highest rated player on the team at an 89.9, and that makes a lot of sense. Garrett Nussmeier was awesome in this game. He had one bad decision and where he threw the bad interception, which was a bad read. But aside from that, Nussmeier goes over 300 yards passing in the game, and he was pretty awesome. Someone asked me my biggest takeaway from this season for LSU, and it's got to be Garrett Nussmeier. Remember, I can remember sitting in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas in that opener against USC, and on the first offensive series, Nussmeier hit Kyron Lacey on a sideline route. And we're like, okay, all right, he could do this. And we saw in the bowl game a little last year, but still, you're replacing Jaden Daniels. And until you go out and do it, you don't know that it's going to happen. And Garrett Nussmeier proved to you he can be an elite quarterback. Throws for over 4,000 yards, joins only Joe Burrow in LSU history to accomplish that feat, past the passing total that Jaden Daniels had a season ago. So another incredible day for Garrett Nussmeier. Braden Swinson was the second highest graded Tiger at 74.3, 76.1 against the run. Look, he's going to make money as a pass rusher, but when he continues to have a run blocking grade like that, it makes him an every down defensive end. That's going to make him a day 2 pick in the NFL. The third highest graded player, just a smidge ahead of Trey'Dez Green, was Chris Hilton. And I know we talked about Chris because of the the job that he did, and really validating a lot of the conversation we had all throughout the season about Chris Hilton, because you saw it. You saw what it's like when you have a guy like that in this offense, the ability to blow the top off the defense. And not just that, but as Brian Kelly said after the game, the ability not just to go deep, but also on the crossing route, which was one of Chris Hilton's bigger plays of the day.
Chris, has been waiting for these opportunities, and he got his chance and was able to do the things that he's capable of doing. I think the other thing was, the run after the catch. When he ran the inside stop route, and we saw a burst from him that, was electric. So big things for him to come.
Big things for sure, and it's great to see Chris Hilton returning. I mean, you just think about it. You had 4 catches for 113 and a score. All that came in the first half, but you just think about next year with Aaron Anderson returning, with Chris Hilton returning, Xavier Thomas returning, Trey'Dez Green returning, and then you're adding Barian Brown and Nick Anderson and Destin Hill, and you're like, man, all of those weapons at Garrett Nussmeier's disposal. And oh, by the way, an offensive line that, while nothing is settled on the offensive line, you feel pretty good about the pieces that Brad Davis will have to mold. One of those you're losing is Miles Frazier, who is the 5th highest graded player on the team at a 72.5. And he probably made himself some money as well. A guy who the last 3 years has played guard, kicks out and plays offensive tackle, and aces that test. Miles Frazier's proven he's an NFL tackle or an NFL guard. The type of guy that can play inside or out, that versatility will earn him a spot on an NFL roster, and you feel good about that. The lowest 5 graded players, 2 of them were on the left side of the offensive line, and the others were defensive. And that's probably not a giant surprise on a day where you gave up 500 yards and 31 points to Baylor. I mean, Baylor did put up 507 yards of offense and 31 points. But your team was able to make some big stops. You got a defensive score on the pick 6. You held them to just 1 of 6 on 4th down on the day. So you made the big plays when you needed to. Well, your defense did when you needed to, but by and large, it was a struggle. Dylan Carpenter played 35 snaps, the most of his career, the freshman defensive end. Got a lot of those snaps in the second half. He was your lowest graded defender, followed by Gio Paez. But a hat tip to Gio Paez, a guy who, when he showed up at LSU, his objective was to come here to play inside, to be able to create some havoc and make plays and show that he could play inside to the NFL, as opposed to being a 3-4 end, what he was at Wisconsin. Well, he was obviously supposed to be playing next to Jacoby and Guillory. And when Jacoby and Guillory got hurt, that thrust Paez into Guillory's role, and he became an accent piece to some of the edges and just a different way that LSU functioned defensively. But Gio Paez was a warrior for LSU this season, and played incredibly well at times. Just a very solid defender for LSU throughout the course of this season. And maybe not the giant statistical season that you would have liked to have seen, but on the season, he ended up playing 424 snaps for you defensively. And he was just a really solid piece for you on the interior. Now, Tyree Adams and Paul Mabenga graded out in the 50s. That was the left side of your offensive line. And Jordan Gilbert graded out at 56. Jordan Gilbert had a huge TFL in the game, but like we've talked about with Gilbert, he's played with a bum shoulder all season. So I'd love to see what it might look like if he comes back healthy next year and how that could look. Tyree Adams at left tackle, Paul Mabenga at left guard. Cohen Eccles played his most snaps of the season as well, by far. And, it's hard not to look at this team on the offensive line at the pieces you have there and salivate a little over what Brad Davis is going to have to work with. It's concerning because you're losing 4 starters, right? You are losing, a consensus All-America tackle in Will Campbell. You're losing Emory Jones. You're losing your 2 starting, veteran guards in Frazier and Dellinger. Your weak link on the middle this year was DJ Chester on the interior this year, and he's the only one returning. But Adams is 6'7", 320, and can move. He's a redshirt freshman. Just got his first real playing time of his career in this bowl game. Could he continue to develop his body and become your left tackle? Yeah, maybe. You look at a guy like Weston Davis, who's a 5-star, who we saw play right tackle some in this ball game. Cohen Eccles, who was a really solid interior player, probably a center, but played, the bulk of his snaps, played over 30 snaps. Davis had 2 snaps in the game, and Eccles played 43 snaps. Cohen Eccles played 43 snaps, got those snaps at right guard in this game, sharing time there with Bo Bordelon, who had 32 snaps at right guard. So it's great to see those guys get those opportunities. And then on top of that, look at what you're bringing in. You're bringing in Carius Kern and Solomon Thomas, a couple of 5-stars on the interior. You're bringing in a Braylon Moore, a plug-and-play starting center from Virginia Tech. You're bringing in Josh Thompson from Northwestern, who's been both a starting guard and tackle, playing his super senior season or his redshirt senior season at LSU this coming season, who could play guard or tackle for you. And again, I'm told LSU is still pursuing another offensive tackle in the transfer portal that could well pop after the team is eliminated from the college football playoff. So, I mean, potentially 3 legitimate starters out of the portal. Chester, who started this whole season, who likely could play guard. Adams, Mabenga, Eccles, Davis, 4 guys oozing talent that got some run this year. And then the 2 5-star freshmen that you're bringing in as well. I look around and I go, man, there's 10 guys right there that Brad Davis is going to get a chance to build and grow and mold and develop to see who fits where and have starters and have quality depth. So it's unsettling because you're losing so much on the offensive line. But the good news is you're going to have a really tasty buffet from which to choose for your starting 5 when you go play Clemson on August the 30th up there in Clemson, South Carolina in that opener. But it's going to be a big challenge for Brad Davis till we get there. All right. We got one segment left here before we put a button on this one. And Brian Kelly, after the game, did also talk about using this game as a springboard to 2025. And he was asked about replacing Slade Nagel on the coaching staff. We'll let you hear what he said. Locked in LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That has definitely happened to millions of people. You have a few subscriptions you didn't realize you were paying for. Rocket Money makes it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending. It helps you lower your bill so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. As we put a button here on today's episode of Locked On LSU, we appreciate you, of course, for being with us. Brian Kelly was asked a question that, we always kind of look at bowl games and you talk about the meaning and the value of a bowl game. And I think Brian Kelly probably put it about as succinctly and appropriately as you can imagine when you talk about the value of that game, that experience, that win over Baylor.
Day really was about the first game of 25. And what we were talking about was, but we want to lean on our veterans to help us get there. And so what was it? What did it mean? It means that we got off to a good start in 25. As you know, we haven't gotten off to a very good start the past 3 years. And so I wanted our guys to feel like this is the start we wanted. Let's build on this start in 25.
You've lost your last 3 openers under Brian Kelly. You haven't won an opener since the championship team in 2019. That's 5 straight season opening losses. So if you're thinking of this as a springboard, it alludes to what we talked about, where you use these dozen bowl practices and this game as an opportunity to springboard toward next year. You got Trey'Dez Green physically involved in the run blocking game. You got Chris Hilton involved and showed what he can mean to this offense. You put Tyree Adams out on an island at left tackle and said, let's see how you do, kid. You saw Deshaun Spears start again at safety. You got Javen Toviano, a lot of work at safety. PJ Woodland played a lot in the second half. A lot of these guys who you might count on next year got a jump start toward next season. Now, one thing that we'll have to keep an eye on before spring is Whit Weeks, and Brian Kelly did update the sophomore linebacker status after a really ugly injury in that scrum around the goal line at the end of the first half.
Early indication is a dislocation of the ankle. Probably will have surgery here, quickly. I don't want to give an exact timeline, but should have him, ready to go, sometime around spring ball. So, obviously, we feel for him, and certainly he's a tough kid that will handle this the right way, but we'll act quickly on it. His family was with him. But again, I think that our team responded appropriately because he's such an important part of what we do.
Witt played 32 snaps before he went down with that injury. And you just look at the linebackers. Greg Penn obviously won't be back. Witt played 32 snaps before the injury, but he'll be back. Devon Keys played 83 snaps. LSU was on the field for 90 defensive snaps. Devon Keys was out there for 83 of them. West Weeks played 65. He obviously took over the middle linebacker role when Witt went out with injury and sort of Witt was playing weak side, but you saw Greg Penn rotate a bit there as well as they shook things up a bit when Witt was injured. But West played 65 snaps. We saw Tylen Singleton get in there for a handful of snaps as well. So it was nice to see those guys get those reps in Witt's absence. Tough to watch the injury, but the great news, as Brian Kelly said there, they expect to have him back for spring, which would be incredible. Now, I don't need Witt Weeks out there for spring ball. I just need Witt Weeks ready to go when LSU plays Clemson. But the fact that it looked so bad and isn't more severe is fantastic news. The other thing that we'll keep an eye on this offseason, of course, is that Brian Kelly's got to hire one full-time staff member, as Slade Nagel is now the offensive coordinator at the University of Houston. And I've given you my opinion about that job, the tight end position, which is I think Tommy Rees makes a lot of sense. But I want to make sure this is in big, flashing neon signs that you understand this is my opinion. I'm not breaking news. I'm not telling you something I know, because some of you have misunderstood when I've talked about this in the past. I have not now, nor have I ever said that Tommy Rees was coming to be the offensive coordinator, that Brian Kelly was definitively hiring. I've never said that. What I've said is we do know, this is confirmed fact, that when Brian Kelly got the LSU job, he tried to hire Tommy Rees to be his offensive coordinator. Tommy Rees stayed at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly would love to have Tommy Rees on his staff. I think he tried to hire him already. He had him on his staff for 6 years at Notre Dame. He recruited him. He played for him. And we know he would love to have him on staff. Well, Tommy Rees is currently the tight ends coach for the Cleveland Browns. Wouldn't it make sense with your tight end coach spot open if you hire Tommy Rees here? It would make sense. That's my opinion. That sometimes coaching staff decisions are obvious for a reason, and that one feels obvious to me. But again, that is my opinion. It also stands to reason that while a lot of coaching staff changes have been made around the country, LSU hasn't replaced Slade Nagel yet, maybe because they're waiting for the NFL season to end so they can hire Tommy Rees. Again, that's just my opinion, but a lot of these circumstantial pieces do seem to make sense. If that is going to happen, well, no. NFL Week 18 is right upon us, and then you could start interviewing candidates if you wish. So maybe we'll get an answer there. But Brian Kelly was asked about that and the offseason work they're going to do. Now, he didn't give an answer about the staff, but he did talk about what he and his staff will do this offseason.
At the end of the season, we're doing what do we do well as a staff? What do we need to do better? And certainly what do we learn, right? We have to do some things better. There's no question. And that's part of this process every year. Whether you're a football program or whether you're a Fortune 500 company, you're gonna evaluate everything within your program. How we travel, how we recruit, how we coach, how we develop our players. All of those things over the next 4 to 6 weeks will be evaluated. And look, this is a championship program. This is about winning championships, and we fell short of that. So we have to evaluate all of those things, and it starts with me and how I led, and it goes through and permeates the entire program.
I love his attention to detail. It's one of the things that's been evident with Brian Kelly literally since the day he showed up, when he talked about having the accountability charts for all the guys where they were, filling you. When, what time did you go to bed? What did you eat? Did you go to class? Like all those checklists every day. It's like making guys accountable and building culture. But you heard him say it doesn't matter if you're a football program or a Fortune 500. It's all, if you're always evaluating how you can do things better, from travel to how we recruit to how we coach to how we develop. I mean, think about it. They objectively did a poor job coaching their defense on how to stop running quarterbacks. You cannot tell me that Oklahoma's defense is so dramatically better than LSU's that Oklahoma, who LSU pounded, by the way, keeps Alabama out of the end zone, but LSU gives up 41, 43, whatever it was, 42, 43 to Alabama, was embarrassed by Alabama and Jalen Milroe because they couldn't stop running quarterback. I mean, if you could tackle a running quarterback, you make the college football playoff this year. Because you're going to beat Texas A&M, you're going to be 10-2, most likely. I understand they finished 8-4, but you had a situation there. And I could also look at the Florida game where you control the clock for the ball for 42 minutes, and you end up losing the game. Anyway, we don't need to relitigate all this. The point being, that was something they did very poorly. They did not coach well enough against running quarterbacks. You got to go do that better. So that's going to be a huge part of the offseason. Not just that, but that is a piece of it. But nothing more important than getting the talent on your roster capable of winning a championship. That's what Ohio State did in the offseason. And they just trounced Oregon, and they're moving on to the national semifinal, and feels like a team that should probably be the favorite right now to win the national championship, the way that they beat up on Tennessee, and the way they just beat Oregon. So big part of that is they went and improved their roster in the portal. Nobody improved their roster more than Ohio State did in the portal. It feels like LSU's done a pretty similar thing this year. How close did they get? This offseason will tell us. The offseason work will tell us. All right, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked on LSU. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We appreciate you greatly. Shout out to all the everydayers as well who are here with us. Hey, now for your second listen, how about you go check out Chris Gordy with the Locked on SEC podcast, available wherever you get podcasts. If you are listening on podcast, thanks so much. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.